up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Trust Your Board podcast. My name is Stephen Wright, joined by Mr. William Monroe. Will, how you doing, man?
Doing well, Steve. We got week 1 in the books here. Eagles got a big win. I'm happy about that. Doing pretty well in most of the fantasy leagues here. Although we do have some big injuries here in week 1 already.
Yeah, we do. That's really messed us up personally on the dynasty front. But yeah, definitely having a big waiver impact already.
Yeah. I think one of the longer waiver lists that we've created here.
Yeah. So we're gonna have we got to just breeze over some people so we don't drag this out too long. But you want to run down the injuries real quick here?
Yeah, so some of the major injuries we saw last night. Dak Prescott injured his thumb against Tampa Bay in that last game of the day. It sounds like surgery is going to put him out about 6 to 8 weeks. So you're looking at probably half to a little bit more than half of the fantasy season. Obviously impacting him, anybody who has Dak Prescott, but going to be an impact on some of those weapons there too. We'll see how that affects Schultz and Lamb and Zeke and the rest of the weapons there in Dallas. Another quarterback injury, maybe less severe. Mac Jones, sounds like all of the tests came back negative for him, so looks like he's probably okay. But more to come there from a quarterback perspective. Then we're looking at running backs, Najee Harris and Elijah Mitchell. Elijah seems like it's going to be a little bit longer. I think we said 2 months.
Yep, 2 months.
And Najee, maybe the dreaded high ankle sprain. So it sounds like he's going to play this week, but we'll see if he's hampered at all throughout this. And then some receivers, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, T. Higgins, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Higgins dealing with a concussion, so hard to get a gauge there. But sounds like Allen and Godwin both hamstring injuries. So those ones probably put him out a few weeks, you'd think.
Allen's already confirmed out this week, right? Because he's a Thursday game?
Yeah, they got the Thursday game. Yeah, they said they didn't practice today. That's why they don't have an official report, but likely wouldn't have been practicing today. And I don't think he's officially ruled out, but almost impossible to get back that early from a hamstring injury the way that they're expecting.
Yeah, and Godwin, coming off the other injury where no one really thought he was 100% to begin with and was just kind of going to, work up to it. This is could be a big setback. So that is a shame.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and it's going to impact some of our waiver options here as well. We'll impact some quarterbacks there, some top quarterbacks there with Brady, Herbert, and Burrow. Losing now one of their top options. Luckily, all of them were offenses that had multiple, but definitely going to impact you when you don't have one of those big weapons there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will jump into those players in a bit. First, we will be looking more at the Najee, Elijah Mitchell side of things and some running back waivers.
Yeah, these injuries, it stinks for the player, especially for the running back. It actually usually opens up some opportunity here for the waivers. So both of them, you could see a hot waiver claim there in Pittsburgh or San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we could start with Pittsburgh real quick. I think the believed backup is Jaylen Warren.
Yes, I think it's Jaylen. I believe it's Jaylen Warren, but he was said to be looking great in camp. Clear backup. He rushed 3 times for 7 yards in the win. It looked like Najee, played most of the game. I don't think he got hurt until overtime or just before overtime. So not a ton of opportunities for Warren. So this one, I don't know that you want to throw it all on it. You may even be able to get him pretty cheap because he didn't do a ton. It's more just, he's not a highly regarded player coming out as a rookie undrafted. So it's hard to tell if he'll be the guy or if it'll be a slew of guys, or if Najee will even miss a beat. He could come back and look fine, or at least good enough to warrant all the carries. Any interest there?
Yeah, I think that's my problem. Like that, they don't. It would be one thing if they came in and said, "Hey, Najee's going to miss 3 weeks," and then high ankle sprain, maybe it bothers him the rest of the year, and you get 3 weeks out of maybe you get 3 weeks out of Warren. But they haven't, Najee could be playing this week and, Warren could see an increased role, but not worth the fantasy pickup maybe. So I would probably avoid him. I mean, I wouldn't avoid him, but he's not high on my list considering with regards to the others that we're going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I'd probably throw him on as a claim, but unless the injury's worse and he looks great in this next game, I don't think you're going to have to spend a ton of fab on him, and definitely wouldn't use him as like a top waiver claim if unless you had multiple and he was like a backup option. We'll run through a couple of more highly rostered people, but if they're available, you jump all over them. First one, James Robinson. Looks like he's just under our 60% threshold here in Yahoo. He's a 59% owned now, so must went up a little bit yesterday. Came away with 19.4 points here in half PPR. 11 carries for 66 yards, scored a touchdown, had a catch for another 3 yards, and a touchdown. So 2 touchdowns bolstered his day a bit there, but even without the touchdown, still comes away with 7.4 fantasy points in getting a lot of touches. So, what are your thoughts there? On James
Yeah, I
Robinson?
mean, I feel like he's the easy top waiver ad. I mean, he looked good. He's not going to be in that dominant role like he was before because ETN's usage was pretty good. But he's the easy one here, which is indicative of his roster percentage being close to 60%. Like he's going to be hard to find. So hopefully he's out there. But that's an
got
easy
a lot
one.
of targets, a lot of touches. He I think is probably best positioned of the 3 here we're going to talk about that are there's not like a defined starter compared to the next 2 I want to run through with ETN presumed the guy, but Robinson I think has just has as much daylight as if not more than the other guys here. So he's a guy I think you could pick up and really get the one, if not a 50-50 split. Some other highly rostered guys, Jamal Williams in Detroit had a good game, and Khalil Herbert in Chicago, both had a lot of touches. Jamal 11 carries and 2 targets. We had Herbert 9 carries, 1 target. So they got some action. They're pretty clear the number 2, but it's probably maybe like a 55-45 thing because both teams want to run the ball and want to use them. So those guys are a little more available, and they're going to be more your depth pieces. There was no injury in front of them, so I don't know that the ceiling is terribly high for either unless an injury occurs. But I think they're guys that probably should be rostered if they're not.
Yeah, again, kind of further down my list because they need the injury to be something. I mean, they're going to have startable weeks, but what weeks that's going to be is really up for debate. Or I'd rather throw a dart at a San Francisco running back and see if I land an actual starter given the injury has already happened.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big one here. Before I jump to that, 3 other names to call out to. Isaiah Pacheco. He did well, but I fear a lot of that was in garbage time. He had 12 carries. He actually led the team in carries, but they were up big. So I think he's probably worth a stash. He looks good. Maybe against 2s. I'm not sure if Arizona put their backups in, but he got some work late. Kenny Gainwell scored a touchdown, and the Eagles looked like they wanted to run the ball, so they got everyone involved. Then Rex Burkhead, showed that he's going to be involved. It's not going to be thrilling, but he's going to be involved here with Damian Pierce. Any interest in either of those 3 before we get to the running back main event?
Probably, unfortunately, more so Burkhead. It's the gross pick, but the grossness probably leads him to be the cheaper pick. But
yeah,
he looks to be a starter and could get a lot of volume, so that's probably where I lean.
Yeah, so I'm probably there as well. I mean, he's probably the one that you would be most comfortable playing of the bunch. But Gainwell and Pacheco have the most upside, so I wouldn't spend much on them. But I think they're probably both, if you have a deep roster, if you have some open spots and none of these other guys are available, good upside shots. I don't know if either would be a feature back, even if the starter went down ahead of them, though. So I think that's the big issue. I think both would employ more of committee roles.
Yeah, that's fair. And then we got those 49ers guys, Jeff Wilson, Mason, Tyrion Davis-Price. You throwing a dart at any of them? And if so, who?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I probably would throw dart on all three. I probably would go Wilson first just because he's the veteran and he is always there. I think more than likely it'll probably be a split between Wilson and one of the two. So that's why I probably would throw the first dart at Wilson because I think he's probably the most assured of a role. Whereas I could easily see Mason or Davis Price coming out and maybe being the 1A and Wilson being the 1B and the other person being left out. Or maybe they cannibalize each other. I just don't know which of the two to make because Davis Price was drafted in the third round. Mason, was it Mason is the last name? Yeah, Jordan Mason, undrafted, but he was active in game one. Davis Price wasn't. So I'm guessing all three will be active, but I don't know which to take. They're going against Seattle next week, so that's a good matchup. I'd love to get one of the three, and then I think Wilson would be the one I'd be targeting. But I'd probably put in a claim for all three and see if I can get one, and maybe you luck out and end up with the one that gets the most work.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think I would lean Mason as being the guy, just because he was actually active and Davis Price wasn't for this game. So I think that's a little telling. But I'd probably lean on Mason. Then Wilson probably becomes the goal line guy, but he's fitting that role in the past. But yeah, it's really hard to tell. But I would probably lean Mason. But yeah, throw the dart at the who you like most, I guess.
Yeah, so that gets us through running backs. Anybody else top of mind that weren't on the list here?
No, I don't think so.
All right, move over to receivers. Pretty heavy here. And so you highlighted a few guys, so I'll just kind of run down some of the other ones here, and then we can talk a little bit more about some of the guys I think that may factor in bigger. We had Devin Duvernay, 30% rostered. He had a pretty big game. I don't know that we love the Baltimore offense, but he looked to be the 3 there. Robbie Anderson for Carolina, 10% rostered. Travis Landry, 42% rostered, and looked like he was probably the biggest target, even though Michael Thomas got a couple touchdowns. DJ Chark for Detroit, 40% rostered. Zay Jones in Jacksonville, Peoples-Jones, Cleveland, both look decent, low rostership. And then before I get into some of the bigger names here, some very low percentage names that actually had a pretty big impact in week one here. Greg Dortch in Arizona, 0% rostered. Kyle Phillips, 1% rostered for Tennessee. And Richie James, 0% rostered for the Giants. Any interest in those very low rostered guys that actually, had a lot of targets on their team?
So of those bottom ones, definitely not Richie James. Like, he's been in the league for too long. And I'm figuring that's just an outlier. There's plenty of opportunity in that offense, but we've seen enough of him. I'd probably go with George, just because someone's got to fill in for that Hopkins role. But the problem is he's only got like a 6-week shelf life, where Phillips, maybe he's just the guy for Tennessee the rest of the year. I don't know how valuable that's going to be, but it's possible. But I think George has more upside, even though it's a limited time frame. I'd probably throw the dart there. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's probably George and Phillips. I don't see one as that much bigger than the other. I think Phillips, was a really good prospect coming in, and we see that now throughout the summer. People were hype on him as a rookie. George kind of came out of nowhere, the last few weeks, and proved it here. Has looked pretty steadily as the wide receiver 2 there. So I'd probably put both of them kind of at the back of my waiver claims if I've got 1 or 2, 3 roster spots available. Throw in claims for some bigger players, and then have them as like zero Feb claims to just get somebody on the roster there. But those are guys that showed out well, but we'll see how it shakes out the next week. Not a lot of difference before them. A couple of injuries ahead of them, though. Keenan Allen, Tyler Boyd, both getting hurt. Keenan Allen and T. Higgins getting hurt, maybe opening some stuff up there in LA and in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so those are some interesting ones. I mean, Boyd historically has always been your kind of prototypical PPR kind of guy. But, with Burrow, you got a quarterback that could sling it around more than Dalton could. So, maybe he has some upside while Higgins is out.
Yeah, he's 56% rostered too, so it may not be out there for everyone, but he's always a guy that you don't mind putting on your bench because if one of the top 2 go down, you can plug and play him if he's the number 2 option on the team. It's just he's rarely the number 2 option,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
100%. And then the Keenan Allen, we got Carter, we got Palmer. Carter had a nice game. I'd probably put my bet on Palmer because we've seen it before. And there was, talk of the offseason of it, how good he was doing. So I'd probably take my shot on Palmer between those two. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the Palmer train as well. I think he's a higher upside player. They clearly used him a lot last year. Is this his third year or second year? I know it's him and Guyton.
Third, I think.
They're both young, but they're both guys that clearly have been groomed to get playing time when someone goes down. So I think Palmer's what I would think the guy. But DeAndre Carter played well throughout the game. He's a veteran in the league, so I think he's going to probably be used, and maybe it'll be those two and Mike Williams. I'm sure Guyton will be worked in as well. The tight ends are getting work. So a lot of weapons there. Palmer, I think, would be the guy for me out of the two of those, though, like you said there.
How about some of our other twosomes here? We had Dotson and Curtis Samuel. Both had good games for Washington, and then you had Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson for the Jets. Do you have preferences on either of those fronts?
Tough. I probably lean Dotson in the Washington first round picks. The pedigree's there. He showed it from week 1. I mean, he only had 3 catches. I'm not sure exactly how many targets he had, but he looked great. Had some really good catches in the end zone for those touchdowns. Curtis Samuel, I think, is going to be up and down. I think you probably, throughout the year, are going to get more consistency from Dotson. But we'll see. Carson, does spread it around a little bit there. And I'd probably go with the Wilson side of the Jets receivers. He's higher owned. But if they're going to try to use all 3, Corey Davis will probably be usable as well. It's the Jets. So I'm probably leaning until we see Zach Wilson back and the offense looking better. Carson Wentz had a great week for Washington. So that's definitely going to be a more, an offense that you'd rather start players on than the Jets right now. So I'd probably go Wilson over Davis, but that one is, kind of take a dart throw on either one. Probably, go one of the Chargers guys, one of the Washington guys, and then one of the Jets guys, kind of in that order. But Boyd in there as well.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm probably with you. I'd go with Wilson. He's got actual upside at this point, and Davis really doesn't. And then Washington one I do think is pretty difficult. I think I'm with you. I'd go Dotson, but we shouldn't be forgetting about Curtis Samuel. Yeah, any other names you want to call out here? Well, I know you mentioned Duvernay early. Robbie Anderson had a day. Chark, Zay Jones, Peoples-Jones. Anyone else interest you at all?
Not a ton of. Jarvis is interesting, I guess. Probably the ones we talked about, just because I think they're gonna have to throw the ball a good bit. Atlanta I don't think is a great offense, but they were able to move the ball on New Orleans, and I think people were excited for New Orleans because of their defense. So it sounds like they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. We'll see. I know Jameis came out, but I think he went back in, so I'm not sure about his injury right now. But I think of the group there, I mean, Chark has some upside, but Jarvis is probably the one of that, middle bunch that we talked about.
Yeah, I'm probably with you. Everything else could be a one-off. Maybe not Chark, but more trust in Landry. Cool. Then we can move on to the terrifying world of tight ends.
Terrifying world of tight ends is right. I mean, there's a couple. I actually had to make a pivot from George Kittle and was debating between Gerald Everett, David Njoku, and Hunter Henry, and went with Everett. So it worked out, because he got in the end zone. The other two, I think, had maybe 20, 30 yards. So nothing crazy there. But yeah, it's not great. There's some interesting options here. And depending on how your league settings work, maybe a really interesting option with Taysom Hill. But we'll run through a couple here. We had O.J. Howard scored 2 touchdowns. He's only 1% rostered for Houston. Taysom Hill's only 9% rostered, and he got a lot of work in his unique position with the Saints. Gerald Everett, as I mentioned, scored a touchdown. I think he had 3 or 4 catches, so was somewhat involved, but got involved in the end zone, 27% rostered. Hayden Hurst for Cincinnati was involved as well, only 10% rostered. Higbee up at 56%, so may not be available for a lot of people, but clearly was the number 2 option behind Cooper Kupp on Thursday. And Tyler Conklin was involved with the Jets here, 2% rostered. What are your thoughts on those guys?
I think it's pretty easy. I don't trust OJ Howard. He had the 2 touchdowns, but I think it was 2 targets or 3 targets. So that screams kind of outlier. Taysom Hill, I'd imagine, is going to do Taysom Hill things. He'll pop off once every 4 or 5 weeks, and that'll be it. There'll be nothing predictable. Higbee, I've seen too much from. Like every year, you can craft a narrative about how it's his year, and maybe it will be this year, but I'd rather not roll the dice. And he's pretty, like you said, highly owned as well, so he's going to be tough to get. So really, it's Everett, Hurst, and Conklin that I like the most. Got some solid usage. Everett, on the best offense, I think is the one I'm going to take the shot on. But all 3 of those, I'm pretty happy with. What about you?
Yeah, I would say probably Everett and Hurst, and I mean Higbee if he's there, because he looked like the guy. OJ Howard, Conklin don't do a ton for me. I mean, maybe this is it. I wouldn't mind if you have nothing going at tight end and you want to pick up Everett to start this week, and then if you have an extra spot, throwing Howard on the bench, because I don't think you can confidently start him, only getting a couple targets but getting in the end zone. But if he looks like it's him, Cooks, and then the rest, I mean, maybe they're just cannibalizing the targets there. But yeah, Taysom Hill I think is the biggest one, because if he has tight end eligibility, that's pretty big for a guy that's probably going to get a lot of carries. It looks like they're going to try to use him in that package and can break off a big run.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. So yeah, you could definitely stash him and see how it works out. You're just going to be stuck next week when he puts up a goose egg or something, and then you don't know what to do. And then week 3, he might pop off, and then, oh man, it could quickly become one of those scenarios where you just don't know what to do. But I guess better to be, have the player with that option than to not have him at all.
Exactly. So that moves us over here to quarterbacks, unless you had any other tight ends up your sleeve that I didn't know about.
No, that is all. So yeah, we can get over to the more so the streaming portion of the show here.
Yeah. So quarterbacks and defenses, as we tend to be, we tend to look to these positions as more streaming options. I mean, if you have a top quarterback, great. But a lot of times it's, you can find a middle of the pack quarterback or defense with a great matchup, and they could end up as a top 5 guy that week. So we saw that here with our first streaming quarterback in Carson Wentz. He played really well in his debut for Washington. Only 12% rostered. He has clearly some pretty good weapons, as we alluded to earlier, and it's going to Detroit here in week 2. So any interest there in Carson as a streamer?
Yeah, of all the options that we're going to have here, he's number 1 on my list. He, looked good. Like you said, has the weapons, has an easy matchup against Detroit. So I'll happily take Wentz there.
Yeah, you're going to be starting him over Trey Lance this week, or what?
No, because Trey Lance has Seattle, and that's pretty juicy as well. But I don't know. It's tempting.
Another juicy matchup. I think he's probably the top option by a good bit. I mean, we have some other guys who played well, and I probably would like to stream coming up, but maybe not these 2 matchups here. Winston against Tampa Bay and Mariota against the Rams. Any interest in either of them, who look pretty solid, but have some pretty good tough matchups?
Yeah, the matchups are too tough for me to trust. I mean, maybe Mariota given the rushing, but I'm not going to trust him after 1 week. And in a tough matchup in LA after the loss, it's scary. So no, I'd rather not do either of those.
Yeah, I kind of agree there. Desperate times, I guess, would call. But just Wentz, I think, is really the only guy of the bunch here that I'd be excited to play.
If I was desperate, so you mentioned, we also on our list, we got Mayfield at the Giants and then Matt Ryan at Jacksonville. If I was that desperate and can't get Wentz, I'll go with Matt Ryan against Jacksonville.
Yeah, probably a safer option. Baker's an interesting upside play because I don't really think they got CMC going a ton. He played okay, but didn't really get going. So I could see, against the Giants defense, I mean, they played solid against Tennessee, but I could see Baker being an interesting upside option if you really need a stream and you want maybe more upside than Matt Ryan, but Carson Wentz is off the board, let's say.
Yeah, possible. But I mean, it sounds like we are aligned on that front.
Mm-hmm.
Could be tough for streaming if you don't have Wentz, but defense is also a position that you can stream here, Will. We got The Bengals at Dallas, the Browns versus the Jets, the Steelers versus New England, the Commanders at Detroit, and the Panthers at the Giants. Who are you liking out of that group?
Yeah, so two newly added here: Bengals at Dallas, Steelers at New England, with two quarterback injuries. Seems like Mac Jones is okay, but the Steelers did play really, really good. So I still think that's a decent option. Bengals at Dallas is a big one, especially with Dallas not, with Dallas not having their top quarterback here with Dak Prescott. So we'll see what the offense looks like. Do they call up San Francisco and think about maybe making a trade there for Garoppolo? Who knows? But this week, I don't imagine if they did that, he would be able to play this quickly. So I like the Bengals there. Steelers, I think, are good. And then the Browns against the Jets, I think, is a solid one as well.
Yeah, Bengals seemed the most obvious. Even if you did trade for Jimmy G, he's not going to be ready that quickly, and if he's ready, he's not going to be that efficient. So that seems like top one. Also, the most difficult one to get. Browns again, like you said, seem all solid against the Jets. The Steelers definitely against New England. New England just does not look right. So those would be the top three. No real surprise are the top three in ownership here. Of the bottom two in ownership, you have the Commanders rostered in 12% and Panthers at 5%. Which one of those two would you stream? Commanders at Detroit. Panthers
I don't
at
know.
Giants.
I mean, the Commanders actually looked decent defensively, but then Detroit looked pretty decent offensively. So I don't know about that one. Saquon looked awesome, but I don't think that Daniel Jones looked very good. I didn't catch a ton of the Panthers games. I'm not sure. Did you see anything about that? Like, how did their defense look? Decent matchup here, but I don't know if the team itself was good.
It's hard to say because just Brissett didn't look good. I don't think that was a Panthers thing. I think that was a Brissett thing. So I wouldn't really trust them. Personally, I think I would go with Commanders more so.
Yeah, kind of in line with you there. Because we'll see. Detroit ran the ball really well, but didn't particularly throw the ball super well. So in line with you there as well. But that about wraps up our streaming portion here.
Yeah, and that wraps up the whole Waivers show. So tune in on Thursday. We'll have the Start Sit episode for week 2 up. You can hit us up on Twitter at Trust Your Board with your Start Sit questions. And until then, folks, thanks for listening and trust your board.